Hello and welcome to the second episode of Pitlane Podcast with me, Aaron O'Neill. I'm joined once again this week by Jason Craig, who's been keeping close tabs on the car world since we last spoke last Monday. Jason, just passing over to you. How's your week been?
Been a good week, Aaron. Weather hasn't been too bad either. Sod's law that had the northwest been on, we'd have been seeing some good racing action. I'm sure we'll come on to that in a wee second, but other than that, good weather, keeping busy, and just keeping out of trouble like yourself.
Obviously, last week we had our first podcast, and I'm delighted to say that we had an absolutely exceptional response to date. We had Gary Jennings on the show. However, this week the cars will take a bit of a backseat as we focus on the world of two wheels. And coming up on the show this evening, we'll have a famous name from the Dunlop dynasty joining us to chat about his retirement from racing, life in lockdown, preparation for married life, and a whole lot more.
I grew up in a motorbike paddock. It's weird. All my friends, whenever I was younger, was motorbike boys. Even the likes of fellas like Owen McNally and that, they're like, Owen and them wasn't just fellow competitors from my dad's and that, they were all family friends of ours, So.
And you can hear a little bit more from Gary later on. Coming up in the second half of the show, we have Northwest 200 Chief Marshal Cathal Cunning. He's popped in to speak to us about how Ireland's biggest outdoor sporting event plans to return bigger and better in 2022 before Jason and I wrap up the show with a little bit of news from across the coast. So we've plenty coming up, which gives you even more reason to stay tuned. So without further ado, it's time to welcome our main guest on the Pitlane Podcast this week. And he's just fresh in from a day's graft. Gary Dunlop has agreed to join us this evening to chat bikes. And I suppose, Gary, there's probably no better way to spend a Monday evening than chatting bikes, is there?
I don't know. I like an old game of golf. I really go for a game of golf whenever the weather is sort of half decent.
Well, this is it. Well, you can just set aside a few hours tonight to talk to Jason and I. But I have to say that, I've sort of been looking forward to this interview all week. I know we were back and forth trying to get it organised and things like that. So I'm glad that it's finally happening. And just to sort of start it off, I just wanted to know, it's been a tough year for everybody. How have you been keeping over the pandemic? Is your family keeping well, Gary?
Everybody seems to be doing well. To be fair, it's been tough for everybody. I was working in the pub whenever everything started, and we were obviously furloughed, and I lasted maybe two and a half months on furlough, and I couldn't do it anymore. So I ended up I done part-time work for Hermes just to sort of get me out of the house as such, and then I sort of had to think about it, and I'd been toying with the idea of leaving the pub for maybe 7 or 8 years. And I just sort of thought I'll maybe actually just do it whenever I had the chance. So I ended up, I was working to Amazon there for 9 months. But I left them there on Friday actually because it's tough going in that there. At the minute I thought the bar work was hard until I started that there. So I got a new job there actually, and I started tomorrow morning. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. It's been tough for everybody. I don't think anybody's escaped this year. Everybody's had a tough time of it. So it's not been easy now, but
yeah, and it's interesting there because, this is a man that can strip and build engines for, some of the most temperamental motorbikes in the world, but yet, a day's delivery driving is a lot harder than it actually seems.
Flip, I tell you, to be fair, it would shock you just how tough that is at the minute there. Like, we're doing maybe 9 hours driving non-stop, and you don't get a tea break, you don't get a dinner break, and I was delivering in Derry in these days, and you don't even have time to go to the toilet or anything. Like, it's tough going, but at the end of the day, work's work. There's a lot of people who's lost their jobs recently, so it's a job at the end of the day. And although everybody thinks these wee bikes run themselves and stuff, I'm getting married next year, so there's bills to be paid. So
Yeah, and we touched on it just briefly there before we started recording. About your championship winning year back in 2019, and you even said yourself there that 2 years has just slipped by. You know, I think it'll be 2 years in September since you actually got over the line and won the championship. And I suppose you remember that year and that season like it was just yesterday.
Because it feels like it was only last year, such because it was the last time that there's been basically any racing bar Cookstown running last year. So it is actually weird. It feels as if it was only yesterday, but my God, it's over 2 years ago now. It's crazy to think.
Yeah. And I remember speaking to you, I think it was maybe after round about Dundrod time, and you were telling me that there's a bit of problems with engine trouble and stuff like that at the time, but you got over the line eventually, and I suppose would that be your highest ranking memory in racing to date?
Okay, it probably is. To be fair, I got lucky at the same time. Like Derek McGee had his unfortunate crash I think it was at the TT. Derek went in that year, and like if Derek would have been still there all year, like Derek would have won the championship by a mile. Like anybody that thinks otherwise is only calling themselves on. But we had a nightmare at the Ulster Grand Prix, and to be fair, my whole year revolves around the Ulster Grand Prix. It's the only reason that I kept on racing as such. I know I wanted a real good run around there, but I don't know what I assumed today, but every time I went near it, I just had real bad luck. And that last year, 2019, blew the engine to absolute smithereens. I never seen an engine blow out in my life. It was an absolute mess. And thank God there were so many boys helped us out, and we managed to get a new engine for the last race of the year at Killalane, and the engine wasn't set up. It had only arrived, and we put it in basically down there, and it hadn't seen a mile, but it wasn't anywhere near set up or whatever, and we had a bit of bother with it, but it got us over the line at the end of the day. So
yeah, and coming from basically, you know, a two-stroke background as such, would that be something that you would legislate for? You know, obviously you were on a Moto3 machine, but at the time, you know, the bikes they're always well known for season and things going wrong, but you know, obviously an engine failure to that magnitude is something that you don't really plan for.
To be fair, we've always heard boys for years saying that the two strokes are a disaster. They're so expensive to run. It's absolute nonsense. Whenever we started with the Moto3, my God, the money's worth we went through and bits and pieces for the Moto3 is it would have covered 15 years of racing a 125. It's that big a difference. Whenever something goes in a Moto3, it's like somebody just drops a hand grenade into the engine. It's scrap. You set it aside. We two-stroke there, something naps up. But at the very worst, it's going to be a crank. You can get a rebuild kit for maybe £300 or whatever, and everybody knows somebody that can fire a rod in. So you get it fixed within a day, basically. Whenever it's a Moto3, it's an engine out, engine in. There's no nipping up a ring or changing a piston. It's an absolute mess. But I don't know where that fascination with the four strokes came from, but it's been proven. Like I can vouch that we ran Derek McGee, the first year he ran for us. We ran him in that 125, and we changed the ring on it once all year, and that was a 15-pound piston ring, and the bike run like clockwork all year. So.
And it's weird because it seems now around the paddock that, you know, two-stroke racing is sort of becoming a dying breed, so to speak. As you said there, you know, it's all four strokes nowadays, and it seems to be the fashionable thing. Is that something that, you know, you're disheartened by, or is it something, would you like to see a rebirth of two strokes again?
Oh, I would love to, but the odds of that happening is super slim. But I think even if you spoke to Derek McGee, Derek had never read a two-stroke until he read my 125, and he couldn't believe how much he had to change his riding style for it, because there was no engine brake and you could run right into the corner. You had to use your brake and running right into the corner, and even coming out the corner, slipping the clutch so early to make sure you kept the revs up. And I think it improved Derek a lot as well as soon as he started riding that 125 for us. So it's going to affect younger riders. I think they will lose a bit of that corner speed, but then again, corner speed's probably the last thing young boys want to learn now. It's all late braking and on the gas early as such. So
getting the elbows on the ground.
Elbows on it. I put my elbow in the ground one time, but the rest of me followed it.
Very good. And I suppose my next question is probably going to be quite an obvious one. But your father would probably always have been a massive influence for you growing up in terms of racing. And, you know, the family name had a big part to play in your career. But is there anything else outside of that people don't really know about that, you know, influenced you to start racing and put your wheel on the line?
Not really. As I say, like, everybody, there's this horrible phrase, everybody uses it, it's in your blood. That's a lot of crap. My brother's probably the best sportsman out of the whole Dunlop family, and he has no interest in bikes. If you give him the keys to the car, I don't think he'd be able to start the car. He doesn't even drive. So I hate that term, actually, the in the blood thing. But I had an interest in it when I was like particularly young, and I never really lost it. But probably after my dad passed away, the fact that me and William and Sam and them were all sort of in the same age group, and everybody had sort of took that wee interest in it at the one time, I would say would have went ahead if the other two maybe didn't. I'm not too sure. I possibly would have, but that definitely gave me a wee kick up the backside to sort of push on. But I grew up in a motorbike paddock. It's it's weird. All my friends, whenever I was younger, was motorbike boys. Even the likes of fellas like Owen McNally and that, there, like Owen and them wasn't just fellow competitors from my dad's and that, there they were all family friends of ours, you know. So it's strange whenever you think. I was always a big football man too, to be fair, but the motorbike thing is more of a family thing, that you find that they're not just well, back then most competitors were family friends as such. Changed a bit now, like.
And I suppose that camaraderie still exists to an extent, but maybe not as much as it did back then. You know, I've heard in recent years, I remember interviewing Glenn Irwin one time at the Northwest, and he made the point about how he was brought up in the paddock with, you know, the likes of Jonathan Ray and boys like that, you know, in years gone by. But do you still see that existing nowadays, or has that generation sort of moved on a bit?
I'm not too sure, actually. There's I remember, like, I would have messed a bit with Johnny a bit whenever I was younger as well. And all Ernie Coates' sons and that there, and Leon Haslam. Me and Leon was friendly whenever we were younger. But you don't really look out for it now, if you know what I mean, because you're that busy sort of getting on with things. You didn't notice Swains playing in the backfields or whatever like we did. But I don't think there's as much anymore. Like, the paddock's definitely a different place nowadays. Like, it's definitely not as friendly as it was. Don't get me wrong, it's not as if everybody hates each other, but it's not just as friendly and close together as what it used to be. Not by a long stretch, but I would say there is wee progress. There'll always be young ones will be coming through that was brought up sort of in the paddocks. But then again, there's not as much racing nowadays as well. Like, so whenever we were younger, we were away every weekend. If it wasn't road racing, my dad was taking us to Curverson or Akadui, Bishop's Court, anywhere, really. So
yeah, and you touched there on the fact of, you know, coming through with the likes of William and Sam, and I suppose Michael would have probably been coming along there maybe behind you, but that had to be a great feeling, you know, riding on tracks and learning from your cousins and going out and having a bit of crack, so to speak, on the short circuits here.
it was, believe it or not, it was a bit different back then because I had nobody helping me. I done everything myself because obviously my dad wasn't about, and I was a bit wary of people maybe trying to help me out that was doing it for the wrong reason and that there. I think Robert started that Dunlop New Generation club, I think it was at the time, and I didn't want anything to do with it because I sort of thought there was a lot of rubbish probably going to come to it that was going to end up causing me just headaches and stuff, and I tried to stay away from it as much as I could. And Robert would have helped me no bother at all. Like, Robert's a great wee man, but then again he had his own son racing, so he was trying to help him, and Michael was still about then with his wee Aprilia and that there too. So Robert was busy, Jim was helping Sam, but it wasn't a bad thing. It taught me to look after bikes a lot more, and we made mistakes every week, but whenever you think on it now, that was the best way of learn the hard way, and whenever it hits you in the pocket, you know not to make the mistake just as much again. So.
And Jason, just to sort of bring you into the conversation, is there anything you feel from our opening few minutes there with Gary that you would like to ask him?
Or I just want to ask, in motorsport, there's a great emphasis in getting young people involved from a very young age, and there's scholarships and there's funding. Do you think is there enough been done in sort of short circuit racing and road racing to get the next generation up and running, as it were? And if not, should there be more funding made available for young guys wanting to win Northwest, Ulster Grand Prix, Irish short circuit titles?
It's tough actually, because sometimes whenever you get all these grants and stuff, that they end up helping nobody. The money doesn't filter through you sometimes the people that needs it as such. And it's the same as everything. Like, you've noticed in motorbike racing, especially road racing, in the last 15 odd years, the more money that's come in it, the worse it's got. And some people doesn't like hearing that there, but anybody that's going to tell me that the racing's more fun now, the crowds are bigger, they're having a laugh, really. But people need help. They do, but well, it's not up to me, obviously, but it's hard to decide what way to structure it so that everybody gets the help from it, rather than just a selected few as such. But the thing is, it'll swing in cycles too. The year that we started racing, my God, the riders that come up through that year was absolutely incredible. The talent and the amount of riders. But then 5-6 years later, there was no riders coming through for a wee while at all. And then another batch comes through. It seems to go through wee phases as such. I don't think that'll ever change. I think just, I know the money is a bit more hard to get around nowadays. Businesses are struggling. People's not just as keen on, not as keen on maybe helping out if they're not getting really anything back. So it's a double-edged sword, really, isn't it? You ask government for money and that there, and you end up owing them something at the end of the day. You're not getting the money for free, so you never like getting involved either.
And just before that, Aaron back, I know you've painted a picture there of going forward. From what I can gather, it's not too promising. What's your assessment on the future of road racing garages? A couple of years back, I was speaking to somebody at the Northwest, and the way they coined it, the sport was approaching a crossroads, a very important part where I had to make a decision. I think insurance levies was sort of at the crux of the argument at that point. Do you see road racing having a sustainable future, or will only the healthiest survive going forward?
To be fair, I'm more worried about it now than I was ever before. And the insurance thing always pops up. That's the thing maybe for people that doesn't see maybe the ins and outs all the time. That's always the thing that people maybe points the finger at and says, it's maybe going to be the make or break of road racing. But there's a lot of great. There's so many different things. There's people getting in with egos, getting into positions of power. It's really hard to point your finger on, and it's hard to tell who's in it for the right reasons and who's in it for the not. John McClure was the last recent chairman there, and John McClure was the boy that I had all my hopes basically pinned on. And I've known John for a while now, and he's probably one of the most honest big men I've ever seen, and has a particular fascination with helping out the youngsters, and not just that there, he wants a family environment throughout the paddock. Whenever John basically got ousted there, I spoke to him and I said when the times about it, and I shook my head and says, to be fair, in my eyes, that was possibly the last big chance of maybe salvaging what we maybe had before, but I don't know. I'm definitely not. I know it sounded a bit dreary about it, but I'm definitely not as optimistic as I have been every other year. So hopefully I'm wrong, but
obviously, there you said about things maybe aren't as bright as what they could be, but I suppose one thing we have to take out of it is the fact that during a tough time we had a race meeting last year, and it looks as if we're going to have two this year. So I suppose there has to be a certain level or degree of admiration for event organisers and clubs around the country that are putting all hands to the pump to get racing on the road, so to speak.
Yeah, particularly last year. What Cookstown last year was, I know John Dillon, I know some of the boys up at Cookstown are real good people up there, and John McClure was chairman at that stage, and the work that they done was absolutely incredible to get that meeting going. And people didn't realise it. There was a lot of people that didn't want it to happen. They had quite a few obstacles inside the sport that was trying to make it difficult for them. But that was the template for what's happening now. They were the ones that made the mold for basically having a day's road racing while trying to sort of deal with this pandemic at the same time. And the fact that they've done that last year is possibly the only reason why there might even be two races this year.
Yeah, and so, I suppose proving that it can be done, it's one of them things where it just takes that one person or that one club to take the plunge, and then the hope is that the rest learn from that and follow suit. And I suppose with Armoy coming up in a couple of months, that's what's happening essentially.
It took such a big gamble because last year, if that had went the wrong way for them last year, God knows what shape that club would have been in. But fair play to them, they made some day of it. Good luck to them. I hope they get the same success this year.
Yeah. And just to go back to, I probably should have asked you before we got to this point, but your early career, I remember traveling to Acadoo with my father many moons ago. I was a young boy, probably my earliest memories of attending any sort of racing. But I remember your outings in the early days of Clubman's, they didn't quite maybe take off how you'd hoped, Gary. Am I right in saying that?
It was probably my own fault as much as anything. To be fair, at the start, I read actually an old bike at Roberts that Ryan Rainey had read whenever he started as well, and it lay a bit of garage for a while. And I read it, and I had a lot of bother with it just because the bike had been lying in the shed for a while. But like I was so happy that Alistair McIntosh actually gave me the bike, because best thing ever done was sitting at 125. As soon as you sit at 125, you didn't want to ride anything else ever again. But it was my own fault. I was probably more of a, if there was a party going, I'd have been as interested in going to the party as I would have been sort of going to bed early for racing the next day. So it was probably my own fault that I missed the boat with that there. But saying that, there, I had some real good races with Alistair Seeley, Eugene Laverty. As I say, Kurt Jameson was there at that time. That the amount of riders that come out of that one year was absolutely fantastic, and that's not even including William. As I say, somebody that could have finished sixth place in a race that year would have been finishing behind maybe 5 or 6 future Irish Superbike champions. It was that good, really. But saying that, there, I have my regrets of it. I should have been a bit more serious, but it wasn't an easy time for me to be racing back then either. But that would be an easy excuse to use for possibly some of my behaviour at some races.
And you came back then, proved that you had the speed and the talent. Not many people around here will win too many Irish titles over the course of their career, but you're happily retired now, I suppose. Tell us a bit about that. How are you keeping your hand in with the bikes? Are you doing a bit of mechanicking, or what's keeping you busy?
To be fair, I came back that year, and I shouldn't even have been back. I had no intentions of coming back. I'd lost a lot of weight to play football, and William was actually meant to ride my bike in Sunflower that year, but something had come up and he pulled out right at the last minute. I think it was the Thursday afternoon, and I says, flip me boy away and into me for this here, what am I going to do? And he says, oh, I don't know, I definitely can't make it, blah, blah, blah. And then he says to me, sure, you rate it yourself. He says, sure, you lost a lot of weight and that there. He says, you'd be able to run up there, no bother. And I laughed at him. I says, absolutely no chance. But he harped on all day and all evening. And it ended up that I phoned up and I got a license basically on the way up the next day and done a medical up at the track. And that was it, really. That was me back again. And to be fair, I was only doing that one race. And the girl I'm about to marry was the one that ended up talking me into doing more because she said that I was scared to do the roads the next year. And I says, no. And she says, well, you are. And then I sat the whole winter and I sort of thought, oh my God, does people really think I'm scared to do a road race? And it annoyed me the whole winter. And then they ended up doing one and then they ended up doing them all. But it was nice, to be fair. I don't regret coming back because I think whenever anybody gets that wee taste of it, it's so exhilarating and it's so much fun that it is hard. You can understand why boys aren't so easy sort of lured towards retirement because you don't get that replacement. I don't care what anybody says, you don't get it. But I got my championship in 2019. Although, as I say, I thought it was very, very fortunate, but still, my name's on it and I can say that I've done it. If I didn't, I think I'd have been the only Dunlop ever won a championship. So it was nice to get that there off me.
Yeah. And, you know, I having spoken to you in the past, that pressure is probably something that I wouldn't associate you with. Did the family name put any pressure on you to sort of, you know, make yourself feel that you had a point to prove, or did others around the paddock maybe talking in that way when you said Melissa was egging you on to come and do the roads? Did that put any sort of pressure on you to prove people wrong?
No. To be fair, I packed it in years ago because I actually went to, I was starting to ride pretty well in 2003, I think it was. And I went and met a fella said to me he was interested in sponsorship, etc. And I went and met him up in Cookstown, and he says to me that he was going to get me a 600, he was going to get me a 250, and I had my own 125, and he says, I'll run the 125 for you. And I says, wow, that sounds hard work, but it sounds good. And that was all right. I basically says, I am definitely on for that there. And then he asked me what my first outing would have been. And I says, Akadu, obviously, at the start of the year. And he says, no, the roads. And I says, no, I'm not doing roads. I only do circuits and that there. And he basically says, unless you're doing roads, I'm not interested. So I remember I was not shocked as such that I basically just went home and says, you know what, if everybody wants me to do roads that much, I'm just going to forget about it. And that's what I done. It was me finished. But whenever I come back, it's probably a lot. I was very big mouth back then. I wouldn't have said too much. If somebody was giving me a hard time, I would have sort of shied up and walked away for it, ignored it, pretend it didn't happen. But as I got older, obviously, maybe 15 years of bar work probably. I mean, I came back there whenever I did come back, and I wasn't interested in listening to anybody. Wasn't interested in listening to all the gabbing that was going on. I'd sort of learn how to deal with all that there. To be fair, even before me and Melissa got together, her family looked after me like a son at the race, and I would just go away and stay with them and do our own thing in the corner of the paddock. And that's the best thing I ever done. So you sort of learn to do it, but it takes the age sort of experience to sort of bypass it all. Then the expectations was obviously gone by then as well, so there wasn't as much pressure on anyway. So.
Yeah, so it was just a case of, you know, the shackles were off and you were enjoying your racing.
Oh, to be fair, my first race was mid-Antrim, and there was some good riders. Adam McLean, my cousin Paul, Sam Wilson, Derek McGee, Nigel Moore, Sam Dunlop, Paul Jordan. And I thought, flip, I'm in for it here. This is going to be a bit of a grueling in the first ever road race. But saying that, the weather conditions was absolutely shocking. And I was running Sam and Derek. And then I was riding Williams' wee bike. He was loaning me for it. And to be fair, I didn't want to go out. It was at the stage where the track was in such bad shapes, and I felt so bad for the organisers because they'd done me such a big favour by keeping the fact that I was doing that road race. They kept it quiet for as long as they could. And I nearly felt as if I owed them that there to at least try. So Sam Wilson, to be fair to him, had a young child not there, and Sam says, "Look, it's bad out there. I'm not too keen," and I would never have made any rider go out. I says, "If you don't want to go out, it's no trouble at all." And Derek had took me a while, and Derek wasn't going out, and I thought, Christ, I'm going to be the only one out here. There's going to be even more expectations and eyes on me here, but I couldn't believe how good it was, and I think I finished 4th or 5th. I think Sam beat me by half a wheel, and I didn't even realise it was the last lap. I was raging because I'd caught up on them, and I felt actually really fast. And I seen Nigel Moore passing Sam, and Nigel started to go a wee bit, and I was going to go up inside him at the hairpin, and I says, "No, just leave it another lap here," and then I come into the start and finish line, and the checkered flag was it. So it was great, like, to be up there with past Irish champions right for the word go. It sort of gave me a wee boost, if you know what I mean, as well. So, and then after that, I think it was at Cookstown. It was up into second or third or something, and I was in front of Adam McLean, in front of Robo, Nigel, all the boys, and the visors came up. I got a brand new visor for the race. I didn't realise because I'd never used one of them. There's some sort of insert goes on it, and whenever I raced before, there was no such thing. So the visor started steaming up because I didn't know you had to put this insert in it. So I could see nothing, and I nearly went through the hedge at some farmyard, so I had to pull in. But no, it was good. I loved that first year. It was absolutely fantastic. So, as I say, that sort of got me. I was only meant to do 2 races, I think, that year, and I ended up done every short circuit and every road race in the company, even done the Southern 100. So.
One thing that's always interested me, Gary, is the fact that, I've spoken to you in the past and you've said I was running a bike for, such and such. And even whenever William was racing, he would have prepared bikes, and, you would have sort of mixed in amongst each other and helped each other out and things like that. That must have been very special, to sort of run a team, but also be fit to ride in the team as well.
Yeah, well, that's what I say, like, because my dad started letting me fiddle a bit in the bikes a wee bit whenever I was maybe 15, 16, only wee tiny things as such. But I never really learned that much until I started doing it myself whenever I started. But William was a disaster to work for because William was such a smart fella, but he was so lackadaisical sometimes. Like, William would have forgot to put a wheel in and wondered what was going on, and he was that laid back as such. But I've never enjoyed racing as much as whenever we were helping William. Like, the crack we had was unbelievable, and the results that fella got, and then wee bikes in the 600s back then was incredible. For just working out of the back of a van, it was madness. But I don't think we've ever had the fun like that there since. Saying that was William. Like, William was more interested in having a bit of fun than what he was racing. He's more interested in playing football than what he was racing, to be fair.
Yeah, I heard now he could have played a bit down the score league in Coleraine and during the week there, and keep the fitness up over the winter.
He was a dirty wee bugger. Everybody has this fascination about William being this wee quiet, innocent fella. Me and him both played for Club Rangers for must be 2 or 3 years, and my God, there wasn't a game went by where William wasn't ready to fight during the game. It was madness. He seemed to turn into different beast whenever the football started, but it was all laughed about after, you know. But I seen us whenever he was writing for Wilson Craig, our bar, the Joey's Bar Summer League football team. We played a match down in Bushmills, and William and Paul Robinson was our two strikers. And I never asked William to play, obviously, because the match was on the Wednesday night. And he sent me a message. He says, "Is there no game this week?" And I says, "Yeah." I says, "We're playing in Bushmills tomorrow night." I says, "But you're obviously not playing." And he says, "Oh, well, I'll play." And I says, "Christ, William," I says, you're a big team now. Like, I was panicking in case he get hurt, because then I was thinking to myself, I'm going to get this in the neck as well, and I would have felt bad for it anyway, because we waited for William to get that big ride for a long, long time. And the last thing I wanted to see was him throw away, or some of us getting the blame for it as such. And nothing would do, but he turned up. And I says to him before the game, I says, "Are you sure? Like, because this is Northwest week." And he says, "I'd rather play football than race bikes."
So what you're saying is he had a great poker face then?
Oh, oh, I definitely had. You know, he had the angel face, didn't he? Everybody thought he was a wee angel. Bless him.
And one thing I want to ask you about is, and you just touched on it there earlier, was the fact of Melissa and how that all came about. But I suppose the big question is, at this stage, has she said yes to the dress?
Aye, well, she is. Aye, she seems to have said yes to everything. I don't know much about it. I think it's not my wedding; it's her wedding. I'm just paying for it as such, I think. But no, to be fair, she's so organised. She's basically organised already. So I'm looking forward to it. It's June next year, so it feels weird because time's flying in that fast. It's nearly catching up on us a bit. But she's got a new job there in Korea now, and she's as happy as can be. So we'll be on then.
And just, you know, going back to that time, did you obviously met her through the bikes, I suppose?
Yeah, I met her actually at the bike show in Irwinstown. And to be fair, it sounds so bad, but I was at a place with bikes at the time that I noticed she was with her own race bike, and she had a set of Owen's forks on it, and I went by and I said, "Nice forks," and I wanted to buy them. Cringy as hell or what?
The rest is history.
The rest is history.
Obviously, then end of July, Armoy is on the card, and you've made a comeback in the past, Gary. Any chance of one maybe this summer?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. See the size of me. I put on about 2 stone in the last 9 months. But no, I definitely, as soon as I finished 2019, as soon as I got that title, and then as soon as the Ulster Grand Prix fell away, I had nothing more that sort of interested me as such. But especially now that we're getting married and that there, there's no interest now whatsoever. I think our families sort of spent long enough in that sort of game. It'd be nice to get away for a while. So.
Yeah, and I suppose you can't. It's in the current climate, you can't race bikes and pay for a wedding at the same time. Just such
you can really pay for a wedding even if you weren't racing bikes. We have 2 massive families, so it's hitting me hard, to be fair. But I'm sure it's the biggest day of your life. So.
And is there any plans, you know, for you, or are you going to run any bikes at Arm? Are you going to run Melissa on a bike, or?
Melissa, I think she's still deciding sort of what she's going to do yet as such, but I'm still not too sure, to be fair. I'm not too sure what we're going to do. It's hard. It's especially I'd be a bit scared whenever I'm putting somebody on a bike, especially whenever boys haven't been doing road racing for 2 years. Like, I'm still nervous for everybody that's sort of going out there, because you sort of worry that the boys are going out there and they're maybe a wee bit too excited. And road racing is different from short circuits. You can ride the short circuits all you want, but whenever you get into a road race, and there's not as many there's a lot more tar there. He slept on. Just panics me a wee bit, but I hope sort of everybody has a sense to go out here, because the sport doesn't need any more bad press as such at the minute. So everybody just be thankful that we're going out here and getting a couple of races done and get it by safe and sound.
And the event itself, you know, and I suppose the track in particular, it seems to be a massive hit with the riders and spectators alike too. You know, Armoy pulls massive crowds and riders enjoy it. And I suppose having raced the circuit, it seems to be fast, and you would know all about it.
To be fair, I never liked Armoy before I actually raced in it. Whenever I was driving around it, such I thought, oh, no, I don't really like this place. And not that anybody was worried with me only driving around in the car, but whenever I'd done the first race on it, I was really surprised, because I wouldn't have thought it would have been somewhere that I would have been that keen on. But I ended up that bar probably Tandree, well, obviously the Ulster Grand Prix, the Daria and them all, but as in national races, there's probably only the Tandrees in front of it. That's a real cracking circuit, especially for a wee 125. I thought the 125 Moto3 Irish is absolutely fantastic. The fast and then bikes around there too.
And I suppose then you can fill us in, and Joey's reopening, the bar's now reopening, and there's plenty of Guinness being sold. So what's that been like?
Oh, it's been good. I was down there, I think it was a couple of days before it opened, and the first Guinness delivery came. And I'm a big Guinness fan, to be fair, and sort of took it upon myself to do a bit of testing that night and the next night before everybody get a wee sip at it themselves. So, well, it's been good. I think everybody has sort of realised that whenever you're locked up in the house all the time and you're only seeing whoever's in your own wee bubble as such, even maybe somebody you weren't too keen on, you're happy to see other faces as such. But I think it's good for everybody to do a bit of socialising at the minute. Even there, whenever I've been down, my God, everybody's just so happy to see everybody else, if you know what I mean. It's nice seeing people with smiles on their faces after the year and a half that we've had nearly.
And just before we went live with this interview, I know Jason was very keen to maybe get the RC45 down off the roof. Jason, what was it you were saying to Gary there?
I was wanting to ask Gary, there's this tale that your father would threaten to take the RC45 down from the bar if the SP1 wasn't sort of up to scratch. Is there any truth in that, or is that just an old wives' tale?
No, that was true. And sure, at the end of it, we did take it down and took it to Estonia at that time. But no, he did. Like he said, he actually read. A lot of people forget. So he read the Fireblade at Akadui that year at the very start of the season, and I'll never forget it, because I remember well, because my wee brother was out and Ricky wouldn't have won that many races as such, but he slid off the 125 that day just as you come into the chicken run, and the young brother was a bit shocked as such, because I don't think he'd ever seen him slide it, and then it's such a slow corner, like it was only just a wee slide, and he was up on his feet barely before he even could stop. And I remember him coming in and laughing at the young brother, because the young brother was a bit shocked, but he was excited about trying this Fireblade at Akadui that day, and I can still see his face whenever he came in. He came in and he just shook his head, and he was smiling, but it was like a smile of disgust. He knew straight away that no matter what they'd done, this bike wasn't going to be up to it, and the 45 was going to come down. But to be fair, the best thing my dad done that year was they actually get Robert to be his manager, believe it or not. And Robert was a bit different from my dad, and they weren't unbelievably close like everybody seems to think. There seems to be this thing that they were as close as can be. I've barely ever seen Robert around at our garage or whatever in my life, and I never seen my dad going around to Roberts as such. You know, it wasn't the way maybe people wants to believe it was, but the job Robert done that year for my dad was absolutely incredible. If Robert if it wasn't for Robert and probably Bob McMullen for Honda, that wouldn't have happened. That bike wouldn't have been here. But fair play, like they took the chance and got Robert to be the manager, and until whatever happened, it was such a good year. Such.
I always find it interesting, Gary, that your father had so much success, but also that success led to really, I mean, he had the ear of the guys over in Japan at Honda. I mean, essentially what your father said, listen, that bike's no good. I'm sure at board level, the company was probably saying, we need to listen to this man because he's brought Honda so much success. You don't really hear that so much now. It's more about teams telling people what to do rather than a rider saying to a team, listen, this is no good. You need to go back to the drawing board. Are you surprised that somebody like your father from Ballymoney, a small corner of the world, had such influence in such a massive company in terms of its motorbike operations?
Too much, because even there, people doesn't understand that. We never seen it as some sort of star or a big name. It was our father. It was just a normal man that we seen every day. We had no idea. We had no idea. Literally, the funeral opened all our eyes, to be fair. But before that, we knew he was popular and that there, but not anywhere near the scale that end up that he was. But to be fair, he always was very highly regarded in Japan, and I would say it was probably maybe the way he just went about his work and said very little, and he was very smart as well. He helped develop bikes for them and stuff. He was incredibly smart, although you probably needed 2 translators to try and describe what he was trying to explain to somebody, but it wasn't easy for him either. Like Honda, some boys in Honda, even Honda UK and that there, they did their best to try and maybe get rid of him quite a few times as well, because they thought he was maybe over the hill and maybe it wasn't just the public image that they wanted as such. But that Bob McMullen, if it wasn't for Bob McMullen, God knows what would have happened. But saying that there, if he had left Honda, it wouldn't have been the end of the world. He had offers even in 2000. He had offers. So there's a couple of big teams says, look, there's an R1 here for you if you want it. You just say, but fair play to me, that would have been easy at that time to take an R1 because they were so dominant. It was scary. These bikes come on the scene and just blitzed everybody for stock version basically, and he took a big gamble. Taking that SP1 because it wasn't proven really unless it were super bikes. And to be fair, I'm not too sure if the engine that he actually got was maybe Aaron Slight's first engine as such. I think it was maybe slightly below that there, but still it done the job, and sure it just became iconic since.
Just very quickly, what you I imagine are very familiar with all your dad's successes and race wins. But for you, what would stand out as your father's most impressive or heroic victory on the roads?
So many. There's so many races 5 years ago that there's no coverage of now. But I hear like all my dad's mates. There's not many left of the creators now, but you still hear some of them saying, and they're talking about races like Ron Haslam back in the 70s when the OWs were in the Ulster. Obviously, the modern generation, everybody's got this fascination with the SP1 in 2000. Obviously, the Ulster Grand Prix in '99 was brilliant, to be fair, because it was so intense. It was actually scary. I never remember ever being in a race meeting where you could have cut the atmosphere like that there. It was incredible. But I remember '97 250 race with Mark Fassetti, and Owen was at the front as well, and his bike broke down. But my God, that was some race. And I remember my dad coming in, and my dad says that's the first time in a lot of years I had to ride over the white line. And he made a point when he went to Mark Fassetti, and he says, "You've never been here before." He says that was some race. So I would probably say that. I loved that. Plus, it was a 2-stroke race anyway, so you picked 2 strokes. You're saying that there, as I was saying there about the Ulster Grand Prix in '99, everybody talks about that big bike. I think the best race of the day was probably the 125 race. Philemon's won an incredible race, and the lap times they done that day, I think William only broke Gary Dunlop's lap record in 2012 or 2013. The lap times they done that day was special. But there's an obsession with superbikes anyway. Some fans maybe not too keen on watching the other wee bikes. But sometimes the weird bikes are the best races to watch.
And Gary, I suppose, Jason harked back there to the late 90s, early 2000s, and it was a great time for your father. He came back, from the brink, so to speak. You said yourself there that he was written off at the TT when he went and won the senior, but obviously you were there at that time. And can you relive that moment, even now? Is there any memories that stand out for you to this day?
There was a lot of stuff happened sort of heading from the mid-90s to the late 90s. There's stuff happened privately, and there's my dad had a bad accident in Latvia where his finger got really badly done, and it took him a while to get back for that there. He got caught sort of with a 500 twin, a bike that I never seen him as excited to get a bike in my life as what it was, that 500 twin. And the thing ended up a disaster. It was basically a showroom bike, and it was no good. Like, it was such a letdown, and I never seen him as dejected. And I think it took him a while to get sort of motivated again after that there. And then it is that accident at Tandragee in '98. And I don't think people realise how badly hurt he was that time. It's some pretty shocking injuries. He lost his finger, he broke his hand, broke his collarbone, he broke his pelvis. I think it was 4 weeks later he won the 250 race at the TT, which he could put up there with his best ever wins. That was whenever you realised how hurt he was from inside the camp, and he wouldn't have been one that would have shown. He wouldn't have been one that would have been showing much pain. He was the thickest champ, but that was incredible. And then he got himself particularly fit for '99. And '99, he had an absolute brilliant season. Unlucky at the Northwest. The 250 was a bit of a disaster all year. There seemed to be a bad patch of pistons, and 250 seemed to be pistons non-stop. He nearly won the 125 race at the Ulster. He lost it by probably half a wheel for Philemon. He won big bike races galore. Won the '99 Ulster Grand Prix, and he was as fit as a fiddle at that time. He went a wee bit rare, but he actually looked 10 years younger than what he was the year before. And 2000, he was in tip-top shape in 2000, but the results at the the Northwest, he was unlucky. He was in pole position on a not so good SP1 at the Northwest. But he wasn't really that interested in the Northwest. Northwest for my dad was practice for the TT, and that was it. He wasn't really a big fan of it. He liked it because the locals liked it and that there, but he wasn't really so keen on it, to be fair.
And just in terms of trade secrets, obviously you said there about he let you sort of tinker at bikes around the age of 15 or 16. And is there things that you maybe think about when you're preparing bikes and stuff and thinking, goodness, I learned that off my dad? Or, is there things that he taught you that will always stick by that maybe people don't know about?
Not really, because it wasn't an easy man to learn off. Like, he would have said very little. He was such a, that sounds bad, but it's such a strange, odd man, especially whenever he was working. It was head down and not a word. And he would have just said to me, strip that carburetor, clean that carburetor, and I would have had to set the jets to the side to see what was in it and whatever, and take the needle out and see what clip it was on. And then they would have went about his business, and you'd have been standing waiting for maybe 20 minutes, and you were nearly scared to interrupt him. And then he would have just said, he'd have come over and he'd have had his wee glasses on, and he'd have drop it down to move the clip up, and that would have been it. That was your job done. But no, to be fair, he had a strange way about him. Although he had boys that helped him, nobody else done any mechanic, and he done the mechanic himself. Everybody else was just there to fuel or put tire warmers on, stuff like that there. And whenever you look after a couple of bikes yourself, you realise how much work's on it. I don't know why I don't most of the time. I really don't.
It was great to hear from Gary there, and we wish him all the best for the future with his wife-to-be, Melissa. And Jason, obviously for me, the main thing I'm delighted to say is that things are returning to normal in the Toon. Joey's is back open.
That means you can buy me a pint.
But next up, we're talking international road racing, and more specifically the Northwest 200. As Jason touched on earlier, it was to be Northwest 200 week last week, but for the second year in a row, there's no racing on the North Coast. And quite recently, I caught up with Chief Marshal at the event, Cal Cunnan, and in years gone by, Cal would have been absolutely rushed off his feet as the formalities of race week took hold, but he assures me that it's all systems go for 2022 and the event will return stronger than ever. So let's hear what he has to say.
At the minute, we're just going to be bigger and better and back with a bang. So, and that's the thing. I mean, we hope to have the full flown, basically the full event next year, and that's what we're planning towards. The full grids and everything again. The riders themselves, I mean, it's like there's been a lot of Glenn's had tweets out today, Alistair as well. Again, the bigger names are great to have here, but they all enjoy the place. I mean, Peter Hickman as well. I mean, 2019, I mean, Stefan Bonetti doing the first Italian to win. I mean, the jubilation that night in his face. So again, like I said, from the privateer right up to the big teams, it's just they all enjoy the event.
So Jason, you've heard the man there. Cahill vows that the event will be back bigger and stronger than ever in 2022. It's exciting times ahead for fans of road racing.
It's really encouraging to hear that plans are already fit for next year. We haven't had the Northwest now for 2 years, and I suppose the desire to get it back up and running is burning brighter than ever. And I know Cahill and his team do a fantastic job every year, and I'm sure that they'll deliver on their promise of really raising the bar when the event comes back next May.
In all forms of motorsport, we know the work of volunteers, but it's interesting here to hear what Cahill has to say about just what it takes to get such an event up and running.
Well, we're actually planning ahead now. I mean, obviously September's are going to be our kickoff date for next year's event. We're looking at different ideas, how we can basically build the event back up again, which we have to do. The race fans are out there. The past few days I've actually posted on Facebook. So I have different things. We have a new banner up out at the paddock, put it up the other day as in welcome you back for 2022. I think we will build on it, and we have that base there to get us up there again.
Yeah, it's interesting what Cal had to say there about the sheer boots on the ground, as it were, in terms of trying to run this massive sporting event from the small hours of a Saturday morning when it's race day to Saturday evening, and of course during the course of the race week when there's 2 practice sessions, there's a race meeting on the Thursday night, and these are the lifeblood of sport arm. Without these people, you wouldn't have your Northwest, your Ulster Grand Prix, and my respective interest, the Ulster Rallies, the Circuit of Ireland. So these people really do deserve our admiration and applause because they're giving up their free time to really effectively ensure these events run safely, and that gives us something to talk about and write about in our profession. Of course, it brings a lot of enjoyment to tens of thousands of people who are watching it.
Yeah, and as you touched on there, it's one of them things where it's a collective effort, and where would you be without these volunteers? But we can only really give a short snippet of Cahill's interview at this stage, but the plan is to have the full interview, so to speak, released later in the week, maybe from the Pitlane Podcast YouTube accounts, where our fans can pop in and listen to the full interview. It's certainly interesting to hear some of the things that Cahill had to say. But Jason, with that now shelved and 2022, the event itself will be 12 months away. Maybe you can bring us more up to date on what's been happening in the car world within the last week.
Yeah, well, Sunday past was European Le Mans Series action, so we're over in Austria for round 2 of that. And Saturday went really well, Aaron, for the United Autosport team in LMP3 and the Racing Team Turkey in LMP2. Temple Patrick driver Wayne Boyd, he actually put the car second on the grid for Sunday's race. But during Sunday's race itself, well, it all seemed to unravel for them in the latter stages, having dominated so early on. The rain came, and with Wayne out on track, the windscreen wiper refused to work, so we had visibility issues, and there was a need to go into the pits. The red light was shown at the end of the pits, and there was a miscommunication between Wayne and one of those back in the pit garage. He breached that rule and incurred a time penalty. So going from potentially looking at a first win of the season, they finished 6th. So yeah, it's a useful haul of points, but it's definitely not where Wayne or his team, his driving mates want to be at this stage. As for LMP2 with Racing Team Turkey, they actually went on pole position in their class on Saturday. Better result for them. They came 4th overall, and they came 2nd in the Pro-Am class. So that's pretty impressive, Aaron, considering that's only their 2nd outing in the European Le Mans Series. So that's definitely a team to look out for.
What about the World Rally Championship, Jason?
Well, it's back in action this week in Portugal, and there's going to be a lot of local interest right across the field. Ballyclare's Chris Patterson, he's back in the co-driving seat with M Sport Ford's Gus Greensmith. That's when their 2nd rally together. They had a good result in Croatia last month, and I'm sure they'll be looking to go on better this time around. The Fiesta has proven itself to be really capable on all surfaces, and they've got a new engine under the bonnet of that, a rather improved, reworked engine, so that extra power is definitely paying dividends. Other locals in action, Finton's Aaron Johnson, he's sitting alongside Oliver Solberg. They get their World Rally Championship 2 title bid underway with Hyundai Motorsport. As well as that, we've got Claret's Josh McErlean. That's the name some people will be familiar with. He's returning to WRC3 with backing from his sponsors in Motorsport Ireland, and he is starting 45th on the road, 1 place ahead of Andre Villalobos, who was on the show last week. And Kesha John Armstrong and Moyers William Crichton, they are back in Junior World Rally Championship action. It's round 2 of that series, and John Armstrong currently leads that by 9 points after winning in Croatia last week. So there's a lot of local interest. And for those who are interested, Sebastian Ogier, well, he currently leads the WRC standings by 8 points from Thierry Neuville, with Great Britain's Elfyn Evans a further 2 points adrift in 3rd. So it's going to be a really good weekend of action. Or Portugal's always a really tough one, and I'm sure we're going to see some big jumps, high speeds, and some lovely big slides and out of corners.
You want to then go on to me about bikes then?
So that's me rabbiting on about cars. What about the world of bikes? Has there been much happening over the last 7 days?
Well, obviously we had the MotoGP round at Le Mans just last weekend there. It was full of drama, but we'll get to that maybe a bit later on. I suppose the thing that everybody's looking to talk about now is World Superbikes are back this weekend in Aragon and Spain, and I think every man and his dog will be out to support Jonathan Rea in that one, because he's aiming to get his title defence back underway and hoping probably to get off to the best possible start. So it's a big year for the Ballyclare man. You know, his talent on 2 wheels is exceptional, but he's hoping to close in on a 7th title on the world stage. If I'd stop forgetting my words here, but then tomorrow being Wednesday, British Superbikes are back testing in Oulton Park. They'll be hoping for a bit more consistency on the weather front. That's after Snetterton. It was cold, wet, dry. I think I touched in the show about there being 4 seasons in one day, but they'll be hoping that that's not the case at Oulton Park tomorrow. I noticed recently that Honda had Glenn Irwin and his 2 new teammates out testing at Cadwell Park recently, and I think Peter Hickman was there along with Lee Johnson. So teams are definitely starting to step up their preparation ahead of the new season. I also noticed on the road racing front that Adam McLean was testing at Bishop's Court a day last week there on the McAdoo bikes, and he also had some massive news of his own there over the weekend. I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a picture appeared on Facebook announcing that he is set to become a father in the next few months. So we'd like to congratulate Adam on that. I'm sure
Absolutely,
he'll take to it like a duck to water, I would say. But the Spring Cup at Scarborough, it's happening. John Burrows is taking Paul Jordan and Mike Brown and Coros there, and I see Davy Todd has signed up with Wilson Craig for that meeting, so that'll be interesting. I think Lee Johnson's heading there as well for the Ashcourt racing team, along with the usual stable mates in the roads scene. So that'll definitely be interesting. But I don't know if you've seen it or not, Jason, but MotoGP last weekend was absolutely madness, full of drama. And personally, I don't think I've seen as many crashes in one race weekend.
I think it's a fixed one, to be honest.
Well, it started out very wet and cold and damp, which presented its own issues in terms of getting heat in the tires, grip levels, things like that, and they were just falling like flies. So it was so crazy to watch. I remember watching Friday morning and thinking, this is crazy. It's how's things going to improve here? But it did, and thankfully the main MotoGP feature race yesterday was dry, but as the good old French weather suggested, that the rain was never too far away, and it then turned into a flag to flag race. I don't know if they have that in rallying. They probably do. I'm not sure, touring cars or things like that. But the bikes, it means that the rider can actually come in and change his bike, so he can jump from a dry setup bike onto a wet setup bike, which means you can lose time in the pits and different scenarios. And Marc Marquez he benefited from that because he came into the pits. I think he was running third or fourth maybe, and came in, jumped onto his dry bike or wet bike, and actually got out the pits first. But it amounted to nothing because he slipped off, crashed out the race eventually. He had 2 crashes in the one race, and the second one he didn't remount. He just decided to call it a day. But Jack Miller, he ran wide in the damp on his dry bike and then into the gravel, but he regrouped and really, excelled in the wet. And he actually grabbed the win in the end, which will set Ducati up nicely for their home race at Mugello in the next meeting. Johan Zarco, he was second, so he completed the 1-2 for Ducati, and then Fabio Quartararo was third. He completed the podium, and it was nice to see the young French rider getting on the podium at his home Grand Prix. It must be a nice feeling. But no, it's definitely interesting. Valentino Rossi, after he started positively. I know you're quite a Rossi fan. You were asking about him last week, but
I think we're all in some way a Rossi fan, aren't we? There's always a bit of us that wants Rossi to do well.
But he started the weekend off rightly. He was going well, and then he actually got caught up in a bit of a mess with his teammate Franco Morbidelli and one of the Honda riders. So that was disappointing for him. But as we touched on before, he doesn't need to explain himself. Man's been there and done it all. So I think he can look ahead, and he seems to be making a bit of headway with the Petronas bike, which can only amount to good things. Sam Lowes had a disappointing weekend in Moto2. He had a silly crash of coming together with another rider, and he sort of another week where what might have been for him, so he'll have to regroup and go again in Mugello. Ralph Fernandez was the winner in that one, and another British rider, Jack Dixon, he seems to be struggling. He's not going as well as he would probably have hoped. He's riding for the Petronas team too. He was down in 19th, but I suppose the only other good thing for Great Britain was the fact that Scottish rider John McPhee, he managed to finish 4th.
Right, okay.
He finished 4th in Moto3, and he had an absolutely horrible start to the season, getting taken off in all sorts So I'm sure he'll be delighted with that, and hopefully, that will get him up and running for the season. We talked about Pedro Acosta last week. He just didn't quite hit the heights as he has been in recent weeks. I think he finished down in 8th, but I'm sure we'll be seeing him back sliding in and out of corners in the weeks ahead.
What's this I hear about some of the MotoGP being televised on terrestrial TV?
Yes, ITV4. I think you could have watched the racing there at the weekend. I think it was maybe the main feature race. So it'd be nice to see it coming back there. I remember a few years ago, BBC used to broadcast on BBC.
That's right.
Two,
Susie Perry, yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's right.
Steve Parish was a commentator then for BBC, as far as I know.
Good, yeah.
And I used to love the coverage, so it'd be great to see it back, and you wouldn't be having to pay fortnight the big money to watch it in BT Sport.
Do you think it's that detrimental to sports? Like, I'm not a big fan of Formula One, and I'm not obviously a massive bike fan, but if it's on TV live, you'll dip in and out of it. Do you think is that the detriment of the sport, where fans are having to more or less pay through the nose to watch these sports?
I suppose, yes, in a way, but then it's probably not legal. But if every Tom, Dick, and Harry around the country is some sort of funny box where you'll be able to watch it for free, but we're not about promoting that. But yes, I do agree with your sentiments. Where it would be great to see all the sports televised, But again, the money side of it is the driving factor, and aside from motorsport, you just have to look at football in recent seasons. TV money is everything, and I'm sure in motorsport circles that'll be the same case. What's your thoughts on it?
I would definitely agree that it's all money driven, but you can't help but feel it. The real, I suppose, if you're a real fan, you'll pay for it anyway, but you're always been shafted, aren't you? At the same time, it's what you want to watch, and I suppose they capitalise on that loyalty and that passion. But it is nice to see MotoGP on terrestrial TV again. I was surprised to read about that, but it's definitely something that I welcome. And if anything, COVID has taught us, or lockdown has taught us, that things are possible. Who would have thought 18 months ago that you'd be able to go onto terrestrial TV and watch live Premier League games? And there they were putting them on. So anything's possible, and I think maybe will force a rethink, and maybe the powers that be will sit down and say, well, we've done it before, we can do it again. So fingers crossed that that happens when it comes to fruition.
Yep, I totally agree. But that's all for this week's Pitlane Podcast. Jason and I both hope that all of you that are tuning in to listen to us really enjoy the show, and we'd like to thank you for all the support we've received so far, because it means a lot to us. We're giving up our time to interview these guests, and we just hope that we're having a positive impact on your listening time. But for the meantime, make sure to rate or review this week's show on whichever platform you access it, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button to ensure our lovely voices can be heard on your tablet or smartphone. And if you're feeling extra generous, give us a follow on the relevant social media channels. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and YouTube for now, but who knows what the months ahead might bring. Next week, Jason's back in the hot seat, and I'm sure he'll be looking to restore a bit of order and tell the world that 4 wheels are better than 2, but we all know
what's the truth. You know what makes sense, Aaron.
But again, tune in next week, and I know there's a very special guest awaiting their Pitlane Podcast debut, but until then, keep her lit.